wanted to see if you had any stories that you can remember, whether that's when you were younger or even when you're older, where you either got a really good trade or you really got a bad trade.
Yeah, so trading in today's world still happens for me with some very high-end cards. There's specifically one guy on Instagram who I've never sold him a card. He's never sold me a card. We've only traded. And we're talking the highest end cards like trophy cards, signed cards by Ken Sugimori, PSA 10 Gold Star Charizards. We, to this day, me and him are still good friends. His name's Brosy on Instagram. We still only trade each other. So trading still happens for sure in the world of Pokemon. It's just very, very quiet and behind the scenes. Obviously, because there's no public record like eBay or Heritage Auctions or any of these big sites that track and record every transaction that goes down through their site. Now, as far as trading as a kid, I don't for some reason have a lot of memories with the cards. I was really big on the video game. The video game for me was where it was at, and I remember specifically as a kid, I had Pokemon Red version, and of course every kid picks Charmander. And the big thing for me was I wanted a Blastoise, but you couldn't have a Blastoise and a Charizard at the same time. So I remember meeting up with a kid in our street, getting the old USB connector cable, and I traded a Zapdos for his Blastoise for the game. And I remember thinking like I was the coolest kid on the block because I had 2 starters, and back then legendary Pokemon weren't that cool. It was the starters, and it goes to show today that's still a true statement because nobody goes for the Zapdos from the original base. That everyone wants Charizard, Venusaur, or Blastoise. So I think that was the most memorable trading moment for me as a kid, was getting having a Blastoise and a Charizard on my Pokemon Red version.
Next up, I want to talk about the cost of cards. So what we were talking about before, because my experience, I'm not a high-end collector. I collect sort of quite middle-end Japanese, the Koro Koro promos, that sort of thing. And even cards like that have now shot up, a huge amount. And some of them, there's a Meowth promo, which is not in particularly high demand, but they've all shot up. They're not selling, but I want to talk a bit about the cost of cards, because although they're very expensive now, they of course weren't. So can you tell me a bit about anything that you remember or cards that you may have bought?
Yeah, for sure. So a big year that stands out for me and a lot of collectors was the year 2015 or 2016. Back then, trophy cards were plentiful. They were all over the market. You had very little trouble finding a trophy Kangaskhan, or if you wanted a number 1, 2, or 3 trainer card, those popped up very often in those years. I remember I had bought a trophy Kangaskhan for $2,000 in USD. And I sold it for $3,000 USD just because it got a PSA 9 and I wanted a 10. And back then, I think that year alone, 7 to 8 trophy Kangaskhan's were sold publicly, whether it was on eBay or a Japanese website, whereas this year, I think maybe 2 or 3 have publicly shown up, and those were the highest grade possible. They were PSA 9, 10s. Back then, these were all raw. And the biggest sale to this day that I regret was I had bought a 1998 number 3 Pikachu trophy card for $3,000 USD. And when I had received it, it was a little bit faded. It had a tiny, tiny little indent. And I remember thinking, you know what, I'll just get rid of this one and I'll find another. Because that's how common it was. Not common, but they just were everywhere. It wasn't a big deal. So, I sold one, find another within a couple months. Little did I know, selling that card, I would never see it again, and the price would double, triple, quadruple, just keep going up, 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 and up. And, back then, I think the most expensive card, even the Illustrator, I think at the time sold for $10,000 USD. And that was top tier. And back then that was crazy to think of that, or even spending that kind of money on a card, because every trophy card behind it, whether it was a Tropical Mega Battle, the super secret battle trophy card or a trophy Kangaskhan, these were all going for maybe a max of $4,000 to $5,000 in a PSA 10. Anything more than that, and you were considered crazy and overspending or asking too much for a card. So it's crazy just in the last 6 years how much they've shot up, because, you know, back then, if you had a couple $1,000s, you could have very easily owned one of the rarest cards in the hobby.
So could you tell me a little bit about what those cards would now cost today as well?
Yeah. So that definitely eats me up sometimes and keeps me up at night. But so specifically to start with the 1998 number 3 trophy Pikachu card, in today's market, that's easily a $200,000, $300,000 card in that condition. I mean, I know people who will pay upwards of $100,000 for a faded, beat up copy, just because you can't find them anywhere. And, you know, the trophy Kangaskhan, I actually brought it here and make sure we get that in picture and focus. This card back then, like I said, maybe $2,000 tops. Recently, a PSA 9 copy sold with PWCC for, I believe, a little over $100,000, and a PSA 10 sold for $150,000. But even then, I think the price has doubled since then with that public sale. And, you know, that same year, I remember a friend of mine who I won't say because, you know, it keeps him up at night, but he had a PSA 10 trophy Kangaskhan, and he sold it for $3,000 because he wanted to go buy a brand new car. And, you know, since then, the price has obviously jumped up plentiful.
Can you show or tell viewers about other cards that are holy grails within the Pokemon card collecting? If you do feel Charizard is the ultimate card, then of course, you know, say why. But if there are others, can you tell me about them? Show them to camera. Give a little bit of background as to, you know, where you might have got them. So, for instance, you know, the parent trophy one, you know, how you would have got it, and a bit about, in comparison, maybe to Charizard, how rare it is.
Yeah. So, funny thing, just before I get into it, you know, I think what happens with a lot of people when they come back in the hobby, almost everyone immediately goes towards the original base set we all grew up with as a kid. That's what everyone wants. That's what I wanted. That's what every other person I know wanted. Nobody starts, you know, collecting these high-end Japanese trophy cards. It almost is like an acquired taste. And even then, there's like another step after that. So in my opinion, when people come back, they want the cards they had as a kid. And then they start learning about, like, wow, there's these Japanese exclusive high-end cards I didn't know about. I want those. And then it even goes beyond that, where every collector I know starts to pick up like a niche, even more niche part of the hobby. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I still have some trophy cards. I still have base set cards. And I love those cards. Those cards are amazing, and there's so much history to them. But as you, I think, mature in your collecting, you start looking towards like what's even more niche, what's even more rare, what even gets me more excited than the cards as a kid. And so, of course, you know, I brought some of the higher end cards. I brought the original trophy Kangaskhan, estimated to be maybe a few hundred up to 1,000 copies made. I brought the University Magikarp. This is an estimated 1,000 copies made. This was given out at a weekend tournament at a college to the winners of the tournament. And then lastly, I brought a Tropical Wind 1999 Tropical Mega Battle Trainer card. This is estimated to be a few hundred made. This was given out specifically to the competitors who attended that tournament. So those are all super rare. I know those are big chase cards, and everyone wants them. But funny enough, those aren't even the cards that get me excited or that I'm constantly on the hunt for, especially now with pricing and where the market's at. If you're not like where Logan Paul is at, or some multi-millionaire, it's going to be a very, very hard chase. So I'm glad I have these. I'm glad I bought them when I did. Those I'm plan on holding on to as long as I can. But really what gets me excited now with the market is I go for signed cards. Specifically, I go for Ken Sugimori. So as people know, Ken Sugimori, Ken Sugimori is the man behind the first 151 Pokemon. He single-handedly created them. He was given, you know, these 8-bit pixel arts of each Pokemon, and he brought them to life. And he's the reason why we have the Pokemon we have today. And so the thing about him that makes his signature such a holy grail is that he hasn't done a public signing for any cards since 2007. Nobody really knows why. He kind of just dropped off the face of the earth and is very private, very to himself. He's one of the CEOs of Game Freak, and so there's a lot of speculation that he understands the worth of his signature. He doesn't want people buying it, flipping it. And he's just a busy guy. You know, when you're the CEO of the company responsible for Pokemon, there's a lot that goes into that, and you don't have time to go to the United States for a weekend doing 12-hour signings. So here's another one. This is a Rocket Scyther signed by Ken Sugimori with a Pikachu sketch. I know it's a little out of focus there. But yeah, that's a biggie. His signature is very, very hard to come by because he only attended the Pokemon World Championship from 2004 to 2007, and since then he has not been back in the United States. And that's just a really, really cool part of history because this is the man who pretty much made Pokemon what it is. We wouldn't have Charizard, we wouldn't have Pikachu, we wouldn't have Mewtwo, all these Pokemon we love if it wasn't for him actually creating them, getting a pen and paper and bringing them to life. And so signatures, I think, are a little underappreciated right now, but if you were to go onto eBay or even go onto a Facebook group, finding Ken Sugimori's signature is near impossible. It's just, they're not available. And the only people who have them to this day were the people who attended and competed in the World Championship.
That's really interesting, that one. I think some really good answers in there, definitely. So next up is, because of the cost of cards going up, naturally there are a lot of people trying to get into the market quickly, make a quick buck. Yeah. There was the biggest example on YouTube now, seems to be what happened with Collectibles Guru, with the box opening. Right. I don't specifically want anyone to comment on him, but more to the point was that it brought up the question of, are there more items on the market that could be fraudulent because you can't open them up to basically see what's in there? So that's really the question, is to whether or not you believe there are other fraudulent items that could be around, and in 10 years' time, people might open up boxes in their collections and find out they're fake.
Yeah, so to be honest, I don't say this to sound conceited or cocky, but I've never been scammed personally. And I think a big reason behind that is I've just spent lots of time researching, and I always have the thought in my mind, if I see something, if it's too good to be true, it probably, isn't the case. And I think a lot of people always think that I'm going to be the one to find that one item, that one booster box where someone wants, $1,000, and I got super lucky. I'm going to make all this money. And it's, we're getting to a time now, and this wasn't the case back in the day, but everyone is very self-aware. And with the amount of information out there, more likely than not, the person selling an item is going to know what the value is behind it. I think finding hidden gems or finding that secret collection in a storage unit or whatever it may be, that'll still happen, but the chances of that are so low that you should always weigh out the risk versus the reward. All booster boxes from Wizards of the Coast have a very specific logo printed on the wrapper. And recently there's been someone, I believe in the UK, who's been reproducing those wrappers. But even then, they have a feel and there's a sound and there's a texture that you can immediately tell they're not authentic. And so I think my advice for people who have any sort of concern or worry or scare as far as buying a product, is it been tampered with, is it even real, is just take the time to research. I know everyone's so eager to try to hit that buy now, get a good deal, send the money, send it now. But, you just have to know what you're doing before you're spending all this money. There's websites like E4, there's YouTube, there's Bulbapedia. There's so many websites that offer all this free information that can really protect you and save you the headache of having to get a refund if that's even available. So for me personally, if people are willing to take the time to research, look up, booster box openings, what does that wrapper look like? What does it sound like? You can save yourself a lot of time and headache. And, I think scamming will always happen. There's always someone out there who's trying to make a quick buck on some person who doesn't have the knowledge to protect themselves. But like I said, research, and just before buying anything, get a second opinion, go on a website, YouTube, just take the time to protect yourself. That's the best thing you could do.
I think that's a really good answer, because the other guys sort of said that, yeah, there's possibilities that there are fake boxes, but what I like there, which I think is important as well, is that people watching, by you saying, you need to go out and research, it actually gives them the information they need should they decide from watching this video they're going to go and buy something. So that really hits home there. Brilliant. Okay, so next up is really the question is YouTube's impact. So there's kind of three questions. So one is to look at how has YouTube impacted Pokemon. YouTube, of course, and Pokemon YouTubers have existed for years. Max Mofo, I think, is one of the oldest ones, and 10 years that channel's been going for him, opening packs, and there's so many others. So the community and the base has always been there, and of course now it's being built on, drastically. So looking at how YouTube has changed Pokemon, not necessarily only from recently, but has it changed and helped to change Pokemon in the past? And then the other two questions are, can the hype continue and can the prices stay as they are? So I think by breaking it down into those three is probably the best way to answer it. So firstly, if you answer, how do you feel, and I guess specifically looking at Logan, YouTube has impacted Pokemon cards?
Yeah. So just to kind of give some backstory, I've been seriously collecting now for 10 years. I mean, like adult collecting, money, buying, selling for 10 years. And my original community was the YouTube community and the Instagram community. I was at the inception of both of those communities before they were what they are now. And back then, YouTube was used for three things. Box breaks, so people just wanted to buy a box, record it, and let people see the cool stuff they were getting. Secondly, it was a seller's marketplace, because we didn't have Instagram, Facebook, all these websites that now offer really easy transactions. So we had to kind of create our own marketplace via YouTube and Instagram. And so a lot of people would just list stuff for sale. You would message them, buy with PayPal, and they would ship it to you. And then thirdly, YouTube was just used for showing off your collection, kind of like Instagram, where you just take a video of every card, you just pick it up, show the camera, and that was it. And that's all it's ever really been for me. So YouTube has drastically changed in the last 10 years as far as what it's used for and how it attracts an audience. Now we have Leonhardt, we have Max Mofo, we have Logan Paul, we have all these guys where I don't think there's anything wrong with how they use YouTube for their audience. It's just a lot different than it used to be back in the day. Back in the day, it was a lot more genuine, I think, than it is today. And there's nothing wrong with the way it's used today, but it was more collector-oriented, where now it's much more hype, video, thumbnails with the open mouths yelling. And, I think YouTube is good for the sense of you can show people cards they've never seen or will never get to see. Or you can show, Logan Paul can open up boxes that people couldn't even imagine spending the money on and getting to open themselves. So I think YouTube is good for where it's at. I don't think there's anything wrong with what's going on. It's very informative. There's people out there making YouTube videos on how to protect yourself from being scammed. There's people talking about the effect on the market. There's so many options. There's Scott Pratt, who's giving analytics and advice and investing. So I really like where YouTube is now with Pokemon, because you can find a video on just about whatever you're looking for when it comes to Pokemon. And it's very informative, whether it's Leonhardt getting super excited opening up a few packs, or it's Scott Pratt, who's telling you his advice on what cards to buy next. So I think where YouTube is at now, it's a really great, exciting place. And I think it has a big impact for collectors who are just starting versus the guys who, have been in it for years and they're looking to expand their knowledge or get into another part of the hobby.
Awesome. So do you think then that the impact that YouTube has had in terms of the hype that it's brought, do you think that hype can continue and that what it's done for the prices of cards can continue, or will it drop back to where it was?
So I don't think YouTube is so much hyping Pokemon. I think it's bringing more awareness. Um, the thing is, and I talk about this a lot with a lot of my collector friends, is us as millennials are now finally at an age where we have disposable income, and we're going back to buying the things as kids we couldn't afford or that we wanted, and we just didn't have the money. And so I don't think so much guys like Logan Paul or Leonhard or whoever you want to think of are hyping the market. I think they're bringing awareness. I think big time celebrities who are so focused on their careers or movies or music, like Logic. Logic's a big name in the hobby who came out of nowhere and was buying first edition Charizard's base set box. He was getting all the things, and he later expressed, as a kid, my parents couldn't afford to even buy me one pack. And when I saw whoever's video it was, it made me have this like urge to want to get those things again. And so I think, as millennials continue to grow older and they make more money, I think Pokemon's going to continue to grow. And I think it's only ever grown at a healthy rate. I don't think any of this is inorganic or inflated. I think, prices have never dropped. I think 2007 or 2008 was the last time Pokemon had a crash. And since then, it's been a very steady growth. In the past 10 years, I've seen it. Even though prices may double on cards or prices may triple, they've always stayed stable, and they've never retraced more than 10, 20, 30%. They've always continued to grow healthily. And I think as the community of collectors grow, so will the hobby. Because in my opinion, Pokemon is our generation of basketball, baseball, hockey cards. We didn't grow up chasing after Babe Ruth cards or Wayne Gretzky cards or whatever athlete you can think of. We grew up wanting a Charizard. That's our MVP. That's just like the thing that we grew up attracted to and what we wanted. And so I think no matter what, as the generation continues to grow, that want is always going to be there. And more people are going to latch onto that, and the community and the hobby and the marketplace is just going to continue to grow at the more awareness that is brought to the world on it.
What does Pokemon mean to you in your life? What has it done for you, and where do you see it for you in the future? But what does Pokemon mean and has meant for you in your life?
Yeah, so Pokemon for me, I think has just always kind of been like an escape. It's just been something that I could go to relax or have fun or just take time to enjoy. Even as an adult, it's nice having a hobby like this that just gives me a lot of joy and a lot of fulfillment. And I have never felt like that with another hobby or other cards. And I think for a lot of people, there's just a lot of nostalgia there. And like I said before, growing up as kids, there's so many cards that we couldn't afford. I mean, for me personally, my parents would buy me maybe one pack every couple weeks or a month. And so now having all these cards and being able to afford to buy those original Charizards or those Blastoises or whatever it may be, there's just so much. So it's just fun. It's like being a kid again. And the community that comes along with it is very close. There's some of my closest friends I met through Pokemon, Pokemon Radar, countless other people. I talk to them daily. We get together, we fly out to each other. There's just such a strong community that backs us up, and it's nice having that and having a sense of friendship and camaraderie and just bouncing ideas back and forth. And, it's just a lot of fun. It's just fun.
So I want to talk to you about the snap cards.
Yeah.
Have you ever come across any or owned any?
Yeah, so back to 2016, man, there was a seller on a couple different Japanese websites who listed every single Snap copy. At the time, it was pretty expensive. I think even back then, the guy was asking something like $3,000 to $5,000 a copy. And that's niche. Like those Snap cards are niche parts of the hobby. Even though there's only 20 of each made, that's beyond trophy cards. That's beyond like these high-end promos. So back then that was kind of a risky buy because you could have, if you had the money to buy those and you could enjoy them and not have to worry about it, that's great. But like for me personally, I was a college student, and buying that card and not really knowing what the trajectory of it was going to be was a bit risky. And, back then I had to buy and sell a lot because I couldn't afford to hold on to a lot of cards, where now as an adult, I can buy something and enjoy it and not have to worry about the money. But snap cards are definitely one of the rarest cards in the hobby, just with the fact that 20 copies were made and all 20 copies were given only to the winner. And this was back in like 1999. So a lot of them have surfaced. The only copies that have never surfaced are a Magikarp and I believe a Pikachu. There's been one Pikachu that's maybe floated around, but there's no solid proof that actually is the case. So Pikachu Snap and Magikarp Snap have never surfaced, but all the other copies, at least 2 to 3, maybe even 4 copies of each card has popped up here and there.
I said I just find them interesting. You don't really hear a lot about them, and like you say, there's not many of them. So I've always been intrigued where they stand.
Yeah, they have like a modern day version of that. I don't know if anyone's talked to you, but the last competition that they did that was pretty similar to it, I have one of the cards here, is the Art Academy cards. So this one is the Art Academy Kyogre, or however you pronounce it. And so the story behind these is they had a competition back in 2015 where you would draw on the Pokemon Art Academy game, a drawing of a Pokemon, and submit it into a competition. I believe there was 10 US winners, 10 European or Eastern country winners. And those winners had their cards, those images printed on the cards. And so what makes these rare is that all 100 copies were given to the winner, similarly to the Snap contests. A lot of the winners have not sold a single copy. They own all 100 cards. And so the thing that makes this particular card rare is that the owner has not sold a single copy. This is an extra copy. A few years ago, we don't know who, somebody within the Pokemon company leaked extra copies of the card to Collector Cash. And Collector Cash sold those extra copies. So I believe 4 of the Kyogre surfaced and a few other of the Pikachu and some of the other artworks where the actual winners have never sold a copy. Only these extra copies that were probably factory samples or factory errors or whatever they are were sold behind closed doors, and then Collector Cash had open auctions for them. So it's up to you to decide whether or not this is one of the rarest cards in the hobby, but with the owner still owning all 100 copies, not willing to sell a copy, the winner has publicly made statements saying that they're never going to even open the box the cards came in. They're never going to release any copies to the public. This technically for now makes this a pop 4 card. And when you think about it, even if the owner is to sell 100 copies on the market is extremely, extremely low. We're talking as low as it gets, because cards like, let's see, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Masaki Gengar here.
Yeah, I've been chasing a Golem for a long time.
Yeah, that's a good one. I used to have the whole 10 set and I sold it for I think $2,000 a couple years ago. I think 40,000 of each card was printed. So when you look at that and you think of how rare those cards are versus a card that only has 100 made, there's still a lot of cards out there that I think a lot of entry collectors can get in on and still have some sort of rarity behind them. So even that Pikachu umbrella card that Mr. Fuji has, 100 of those were made, but that card is maybe $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 and only 100 made. Like, we're talking 100. That's really, really rare. So that is like, that could be considered almost a trophy card, just in the sense of how limited they were made. And even though one person obviously controls the quantity of that card, even if all 100 hit the market, 100 versus a million collectors is a very, very small number that not every person can get their hands on. And you can go on eBay right now, eBay Art Academy Pokemon cards, and there's a couple listed there. And if you think about it, that's one of 100 that no one else will ever have. So that's a great card to start looking towards too, if that's like something if you're trying to go after, like, some sort of rarity, but you're not willing to dish out 5 or 6 figures like these high-end guys are doing.
Sure. So one of the other ones, I can't remember if we spoke a few years ago, or if it was someone else. Did you own, I saw on your Instagram account, you put up one which showed the fake ones, but the phone cards of the three birds.
Yeah, I love the phone cards.
Did you ever own them?
Yeah. So I graded the first ever PSA 10 set, and I've owned 3 different sets of the card.
So I remember we were speaking about it on Instagram years ago. And I love them because the art's obviously very different. You don't see it anywhere else. What the rarity of those ones? How do people in the community sort of view those cards in comparison to other sort of rare, not necessarily trophy? I don't know if are they considered trophy?
It's hard to say. So those were given out at the Tropical Mega Battle to competitors at the side events. And there's an estimated of those of 100 of each or less. Because at that competition, only around 40 kids attended it. So if each kid got one of each copy, that makes 40. Maybe if staff members, if the parents who went with their kids. So I think 100 of each copy is a safe number. I don't know if I would consider them a trophy card, maybe a tournament participation prize card, if we're gonna get technical. But the thing with those is, one, I think they're very underappreciated, undervalued, because they feature unique art that has never been on another Pokemon card. The thing that I think a lot of people are turned off about is it's a phone card. So the front of a card looks like a Pokemon card, but the back is this kinda ugly gray card covered in a bunch of text that has like a barcode. So I remember my big thing was back in the day when I collected those, one of my defenses was when you look at a Pokemon card, you pay attention to the front, you don't look at the back. No one looks at the back of a card and stares at that for a few minutes and takes joy out of that. They stare at the front, look at the art, look at the text, the front. So I love those cards, and those are still relatively affordable to some degree. I believe a PSA 10 set sold just within the last year for $20,000. So, if you divide that by 3, that's like just under $7,000 a card for a 1999 participation prize card that was only given out at one tournament. But yeah, I love those cards. Those are probably one of my favorite cards in the hobby for sure.
Yeah, they're very, very cool. And you sort of don't see much of them. But are you sort of more into? Do you have a sort of a preference for Japanese over English, or is?
Yeah, definitely love Japanese more than English. I only own a handful of English cards, and the reason why I do is because a few years ago I decided to collect my favorite artworks of cards. So for instance, like this Skyridge Gengar is English. I graded that one myself. I have a Expedition Mew here. So the only English cards I collect are the ones where I decided a few years ago, like, hey, I'm gonna go buy my favorite artworks just to collect them and have them. Little did I know all those cards would quadruple in price, so I got lucky and bought those at the right time. But yeah, I'm a big English guy. Japanese cards is what got me hooked and into like the high-end grading. So I got back into Pokemon 10 years ago, and I actually brought the card that got me back into it. So my parents, as a joke, bought me a couple packs, and I pulled this guy right here. So this is the Radiant Collection Full Art Shaman. This card, I didn't know what full arts were at the time, and it blew my mind that Pokemon had these, full artwork cards. And so I got back into Pokemon, and a few months into it, I started researching, and I found out that Japan had exclusive cards that the US never saw. And so the card that actually got me into Pokemon collecting, and is the reason why I'm probably here today, is this guy right here, which is a Verse Entei card. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Verse series. So Verse series is what Gym Challenge and Gym Hero was to us. But Japan came out with a third version called the Verse series that was based off of Gold and Silver. So they had, Claire's Dragonite. They had all the different gym leaders from Gold and Silver and it was their Pokemon. So this is the card I just showed was Rocket's Entei. And I remember the first time I ever saw that, it blew my mind that there was an entire set of cards that never hit the US market. And I think that day I spent like hours and hours of time researching just Japanese cards on Bulbapedia that the US never saw. And then that's what made me be like I literally went on eBay and bought a PSA 9 copy that day. I think I paid like $20 for it. And since then, I've never looked back, and Japanese has always been my go-to for when it comes to collecting cards.
I had the same sort of thing with the vending sets. When I saw them, I was like, what's
those are crazy.
And I think the best, since I got back into collecting, the best time that I actually had was unpeeling all of those. I just had the best time. I sat in my room on my bed, on my own, just doing it, and just like being like, oh my God, this is so cool, you know? Yeah. I just had a great time with those, I really did.
Those are hard to grade. Like, a lot of people don't know that those have really bad centering, and the peeling can actually like tear off the edges of the card sometime. But that's a great set. I love the bending set too.